Thank you for joining us today. So, class, we have Billy from TARDIS talking to us today about her healthcare organisation. In the interview is also Erin and Meredith. Just for the tape, Billy has agreed to have the interview audio recorded and shared with Kit 707, keeping in mind we are under a confidentiality agreement with Billy. Excellent. Welcome.
Great. Thanks, Erin.
Can you tell us about your organisation, please?
Sure. We're a small to medium-sized business going through some growth at the moment, and we're typically focused in the health industry. We've got a number of sites across the south of Tasmania, and we're also looking to explore other options within the state, but primarily in the south at the moment. We've got about 45 staff and about 45 contractors, so we've got quite a mix. Our focus is really just on that patient care and their general well-being.
Excellent. Great. And are the staff full-time, part-time, casual? How are they made up of?
Yep, they're actually all of those.
Yep.
So we have quite a mix in our staffing.
Excellent.
And yes, a number of them will just work a low number of hours and shifts, but then at the other end of the spectrum, some of them are working extended hours as well. So it's quite a range within that.
Fantastic. Okay. So how does your organisation use data and information?
So data is absolutely pivotal to our business. We need to make sure that we have strong, robust, comprehensive health records. So that is our primary business. Of course, in addition to that, we have the same data needs that most businesses do, which is in relation to our financial records. We need to ensure that we maintain privacy, because in the health industry that is heavily regulated, and we have a number of rules that we need to follow there. We look at population data, so that we're tracking how we're going, and a lot of our information needs to go back to the government for verification and audit, so we need to make sure that that data is appropriately kept.
Okay, right. So there's some strict data standards that you're required to adhere to, as well as it being pivotal to your organisational needs.
That's right. Yep. So certainly with regard to our relationship with our customers, we need to make sure we've got that information at our fingertips and that it's of high integrity. But then also we go through a number of accreditation standards and are audited on a 3-yearly basis, and to ensure that we are maintaining records in an appropriate way. If there are any breaches, then we need to advise those immediately.
Okay, great. Well, not great, but good to understand. What systems do you use to access, share and store data and information?
Well, the answer to that question's actually changed a bit since we acquired a new business at the beginning of February. We've had to change our IT significantly to accommodate that. We had a number of servers, but they were at capacity, and so to bring on another business, which was about a 30% uplift, we actually had to either buy new servers or start to look at an alternative. And the alternative was to go to a data centre and move now to virtual servers. And given the importance of data for our business and the need for high security and ability to access information quickly, we chose to move to virtual servers, and that is what we've done. It wasn't a straightforward process. We're actually still in negotiations with the provider around the service level agreement because of the complexity of medical records and some of the legislative requirements. So it's quite complex in that sense. We, of course, use your standard offerings within the office about the Microsoft suite of products. Given the nature of our work, we have specific software that is for the medical industry. There are 2 primary providers, and for reasons that were before my time, we actually have a hybrid system, and this has actually complicated our IT lives significantly.
Mm-hmm.
So we have our billings and details on one type of software, and we have our clinical notes on another.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that I'll be looking at in the next few months to see if that still makes sense, because in the changeover it did complicate our lives.
Okay. All right, so you've got a few specialist systems upgraded to some virtual systems, and also using some common systems that most people be familiar with, like the Office suite.
That's right, yes.
Excellent. Okay, great. So does your company have an information management strategy?
No, we don't at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And coming into the end of financial year, and given that I'm fairly new to my role,
Mm-hmm.
we're actually undertaking planning days and review. And it's something that we identified yesterday, that we really do need to start to look at our information strategies
Mm-hmm.
and what our approach is going to be. So no, at the moment we don't have one.
Yeah.
But we are going to be growing and really need to be able to perhaps have some in-house,
Mm-hmm.
or perhaps actually just have IT specialists come in and project manage specific acquisitions or projects for us. We're going through the numbers to see what's the best strategy for us.
Great. So then going on from that, I'm inferring that the reason you didn't have an information strategy before was the company wasn't mature enough in growth or size, or?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. There are a number of issues. We have had growth, as I say, and particularly our most recent acquisition. So there hasn't been identified a need. There was also a provider in the market who did look after, or does continue to look after, medical providers.
Mm-hmm.
We're at the stage now that the complexity of our business is probably starting to push their capability, and therefore starting to think about what might be the best strategy for us to move forward.
Okay.
But yes, it's been something that people have taken on and had particular interest in,
Yep.
but it hasn't been allocated to a person, and therefore identified the need for a specific strategy in that area.
Good to know. Excellent. So what role does data and information have for your organisation?
The fact that we're actually in the medical industry, as I referred to previously, is highlights the fact that we do have fairly strong legislative and regulatory requirements
Mm-hmm.
about our data,
Mm-hmm.
how it's maintained and stored, the
Mm-hmm.
fact that we can't have anything offshore, for example, so that limits our ability to use some of the bigger providers, because a lot of this stuff is offshore. So it's vital for us to keep that those records safe.
Mm-hmm.
Hacking is, of course, and the cyber issues are something that we have insurance against,
Mm-hmm.
but we're particularly keen to make sure that we don't lose any of our records.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't have that information not only available, but available very quickly, then there's potentially life and death situations that can occur.
Mm-hmm.
And most recently we had a patient who arrived at the front desk and had a very low blood pressure,
Mm-hmm.
and was triaged into one of our health workers, who identified that there was some significant issues after reviewing his patient files.
Yep.
Being able to see that, even though he actually attends other clinics, but of course being able to access that at any of our sites.
Mm-hmm.
So she could call up all that information with all the specialist details and all the other information over time, and he was taken by ambulance to one of the hospitals and operated on immediately. And if we hadn't been able to act quickly, then he most certainly would have died of a bleed.
Right, so for you, some like data and information is time critical and actually has a life and death
Absolutely.
impact for, would you say the majority of your operations? Because I know most businesses, like that would be part of your core consideration. So if you get data that is not timely or incorrect or accessible by all the people in your organisation, it could have a flow-on effect that could have that life and death.
Absolutely, it could. I certainly hope that the times where life or death is actually at play is on the lower scale. But if that information wasn't to hand and wrong advice was given, we have a range of litigation issues. But most importantly, we have patient care that would be compromised through that. And as I say, it's not just, it's for every aspect of our business, not just our practitioners, but also the support staff that are required to enable that to happen. So yes, absolutely vital. And of course, as with any business, the data outside the medical field is vital in relation to, again, accreditation and our requirements for the government, but also just in terms of operating a business, so some of our financial records, staffing, HR, the range of issues that most businesses face.
Okay, great. Can you tell us about that recent acquisition project your company has just completed?
So it's been interesting and challenging. It was about a 30% uplift in the size of our business, so quite a sizable acquisition to take on. It's in the same area that we operate in, and yet, interestingly, the demographics and some of the nuances of the acquisition are quite different to our existing business. If I focus exclusively on the software and hardware aspects of the acquisition, I think I could say it has been one of the two hardest issues for us to manage. The HR, with some of the complexities of collective bargaining agreements, was one complication. But the second, with regard to, I mentioned earlier that there are two primary medical software offerings. Our acquisition, unfortunately, was on the other type of software. So in addition to transferring all of our data onto the virtual servers, which was one piece of work, we also then had to migrate about 7,000 to 10,000 patient records onto an alternate software offering. Unfortunately, the providers of those software are unhelpful in migrating things across. And our IT providers have certainly worked diligently to try and find workarounds, but in the migration we've had duplication of records, which unfortunately has been completely random. It's been hard to determine what would be duplicated. In addition to that, we've lost demographic data, which is vital for our accreditation, things like ethnicity and some of the other basic demographics that are required. So that has been exceedingly challenging, and so what that has meant is that we've actually had to migrate each file across as a person presents to us. Which has slowed down our staff, as you can imagine, impacted our relationship with our customers, and has led, unfortunately, to significant brand damage. It's also had a flow-on effect to our contractors, who have been unable to provide the high level of service that they seek. So it's not all a bad story, but if I focus exclusively on the IT, it has been extraordinarily challenging and continues to be challenging.
Okay. Yep, so some of the impact you spoke about was brand damage, was the integrity of the records, for a larger word, your interaction with customers, your interaction with accreditation requirements. So they seem to all be linked back to an information need that has been impacted. So going from an information perspective, besides, and the brand damage and the customer experience is all exceedingly important for your organisation, how else from an information perspective has this impacted you? So maybe in your ability to communicate with other staff members, or to communicate with other stakeholders in the business, or to be able to make some key business decisions?
What it's done is actually put significant pressure back on my staff. So I do have a number of people that are teetering on the verge of stress leave because of the pressure that it's placed on them. I have lost some staff. They're not entirely, those losses are not entirely attributable to the IT, but it was certainly one of the factors, and certainly up there in the top one or two factors. So it's also increased to just the number of complaints, which has then added more pressure on my people. The other thing that's happened in that is because of some of those IT issues at the new site, it's actually slowed down our service at our existing sites. So not only has it had an impact on the acquisition site, but the whole of my business. So and even at a staff level, because some of us have been caught up dealing with these issues, we haven't been able to deal with our existing business, and they're feeling unloved and uncared for, and it's having a flow-on effect there. So the IT as a part of the acquisition has absolutely significantly impacted our overall business.
Right, that's devastating, isn't it?
Yes, despite significant planning and efforts to the contrary. This was the largest transfer of files that had been done in the state. And so there was some learning by everyone as we went through. It's not necessarily pointing the finger, it just was the way it was.
I can understand that. So, so we can understand a bit more about how information flows in your organisation. How is information shared internally?
So I guess starting at the most basic level, we are a very people-oriented business. So much of our correspondence and our discussions and information sharing is in that face-to-face forum. Naturally enough, that needs to, on occasions or generally, be recorded in one of our software programs. So we need to ensure that we're sharing that information across all of our sites instantaneously. So we have all through the same server. And in actual fact, prior to the NBN, we made a significant investment in our IT capability such that we've got receiver dishes at all of our sites to create a private satellite-based network, because without our ability to act quickly, we cannot do our business. So that enables us to work in-house, working with each other. We, of course, the privacy, given the nature of our work, is again one of those things that was forefront in the thinking. We obviously speak by phone, where information's actually shared. We do internal rounds of our information, so the old-fashioned pieces of paper get shared as we move around our sites, with delivery and some of our staff moving through there.
Okay, that's great to know. And how is information shared externally?
Because we're in the medical world, I think it might be the last bastion for the use of faxes. My understanding is that it's deemed by regulatory bodies and the bureaucracy to be the safest form of communication. So we therefore have a significant number of faxes. We are actually looking to move to virtual faxes. It is one of the pieces of work we have in train. But at the moment we have the old-fashioned fax, which is then sent through and requires considerable scanning of that hard documentation into our software.
Mm-hmm.
We have email,
Mm-hmm.
but our patient records cannot be emailed
Mm-hmm.
because of that confidentiality issue.
Mm-hmm.
We again use phone for external, face-to-face, and we do rely on, given the nature of the information that we're sending out, that it needs to be in the right hands. We do send letters via registered mail.
Mm-hmm.
So they're probably the main things that we use for the external delivery of information.
Okay, so for the core parts of your business, which is that time critical and sensitive data, your main communications would be fax because that's mandated by legislation, and through registered mail because then you can control who the end user is. For operational parts that are not linked to those privacy concerns, you've got the traditional methods of email, phone, face-to-face, and I suppose some paper-based that doesn't have that security requirement.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So if we were to do just merely marketing or something to that effect, of course that would be done, which I would say also includes our social media offerings. But also might be things like a letter drop or something to that effect, which of course doesn't need to be registered. But we do seek to use most forms of communication, most media for our information flows. Yes.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you, Billy, for your time. If we have any further questions, are you happy to have a follow-up interview with me so we can ask some follow-up questions?
Absolutely, yeah. We're really keen to see if we can do our IT better, and I would be most delighted to meet with you and discuss any other questions that you might have that have arisen from what we've talked about.
Great, thank you. We'll be in touch.
Pleasure.